We are live. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Nolan Hawkeye Anthony YouTube channel. And I thank all of you for being here, wherever you may be, and of course, however you may be listening. This is going to be another one of those quick and short videos that I always talk about. I thought about recording this live or doing this live, but I decided to just record this really quickly and get it out there. And without beating around the bush too much, this video is about Brian Ferentz directly, whether he should be fired or not, and how all of this is affecting Kirk Ferentz's legacy / the issues that are being exposed with the University of Iowa and their athletic department. Now, there are a lot of components to this, and I have touched on this a little bit in previous videos without directly titling or making the direct topic about this, Brian Ferentz. So let's just dive into this bit by bit here. And as I said, there's many different angles you can take. You can come at it from the perspective of the allegations directly. You can come at this from the nepotism directly. But I'm going to provide, in the best way I can, a very broad stroke of how I think this should be viewed, especially from an Iowa Hawkeye fan. Okay. Brian Ferentz, let's start with him. By the way, if you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button, support your boy, fellow Iowa Hawkeye fan. The channel just continues to grow, and it's all because you guys are really the best fans in the world. It takes 1.5 seconds to hit that subscribe button. But if you don't want to subscribe, like, comment, share, you know the drill. Without further ado, let's get into this. So Brian Ferentz, when you talk about Brian, you have to start with the fact that he's been at Iowa for several years now. This is not his first year. This is not his second year. And because of that, I think a different viewpoint needs to be attached to all of this, because at the beginning of all of this, you had certain people pointing out the nepotism, how they were not okay with that. But at the time, I would say by and large, the fan base defended Brian and Kirk Ferentz in the athletic department because they wanted to give Brian Ferentz a real shot. I have pulled up his Brian Ferentz Wikipedia page, which of course is not always accurate, but this is his resume, so to speak, so that it's right there so everybody can see. But again, going back to the topic at hand, when he was given the reins to the offense, most fans defended him because it was early on, and I think a lot of fans were willing to look past the nepotism and buy into the untruth that Brian Ferentz, it was not nepotism because Brian Ferentz was directly reporting to Gary Barta as opposed to directly reporting to Kirk Ferentz. Okay. And to be totally frank, I think I was one of those people. I think I was someone who, the nepotism part, in all honesty, is not my biggest gripe. Okay. My biggest gripe is that he is not getting the job done. Everything else is just icing on the cake. So, but going back to the whole story, a lot of fans were willing to look past it because he was new, as I've said twice now. They wanted to give him a chance. And because I think by and large, we thought, well, he played for Iowa. He's the son of a historic coach. It's in his blood. He'll be fine. He'll figure it out. And I don't think anybody expected that it would get as bad as what we have seen this year. And make no mistake, folks, I could easily pull up the team statistics. It's bad. No matter how you slice it, it is very, very poor. The offense is terrible. It is worse than the years of Jake Rudock, Christensen. This is the worst Iowa offense the past 2 years that we have seen in the tenure of Kirk Ferentz. Iowa is in the bottom of the FBS, okay? Of 31 whatever teams, Iowa is 120 or below in almost every major offensive statistical category. And I also want to dispel because when I talk about this, a lot of people will comment, or at least some people will comment to me and say, well, all of this is true, but also Iowa doesn't get a lot of talent, which in previous years was somewhat true, but now it's just not. Okay. And just, I'll give you an example. Gavin Williams, high 3-star, low 4-star, who had a Michigan offer as well as Iowa offer. Caleb Johnson, 4-star running back out of Ohio, who is committed to play for Cal before he committed to the Hawkeyes. Brody Brecht, high 3-star, nearly got drafted in the major leagues. Probably would have had, he not been so committed to playing for the Iowa Hawkeyes. Keegan Johnson, Arland Bruce, 4-star guys. Consensus 4-star high school athletes. Deontay Vines, high 3-star with multiple high major offers. Jacob Bostic, high 3-star with multiple high major offers. The entire Josiah Patterson had offers up and down the SEC. Okay, now not all of these guys are playing right now, but I am giving you the facts of these recruits coming out of high school. The offensive line is littered with 4-star, high 3-star guys. Okay. So going back, I just want to put an end to the idea that Iowa does not have talent. They have brought in plenty of talent. Kelton Copeland has done a great job, and Derek Foster, but Derek Foster did a good job of making the running back room stable again, and he recruited it fairly well. Liddell Betts has done a pretty good job so far as well, at least recruiting, even though he lost a commitment from 4-star Kendrick Raphael. I don't want to get into that's just the way my brain works. I'm getting into the weeds too much here. But Kelton Copeland did a great job, or has done a great job, recruiting the wide receiver position. Hell, Iowa has a 4-star wide receiver out of the state, of a high 3-star, low 4-star receiver out of the state of Iowa in Alex Mata. There are weapons. There's talent on the offensive side of the football. And even if there wasn't, it still would not be good enough. So going back to Brian Ferentz, okay, that is the main thing. And I think the other aspect that especially I fell into is we have seen some great offensive. Actually, before I get into that, the other aspect is that Ken O'Keefe stayed a part of the Iowa coaching staff, or I think he came back to the Iowa coaching staff to help Brian Ferentz. Not only did they do that with Ken O'Keefe, but they also brought in a former Wisconsin offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach in Budenmeyer or something like that. In other words, Brian Ferentz has been given all the support that you could possibly give an offensive coordinator to do his job. Now, the Ken O'Keefe aspect is important, and I'll come back to that momentarily, okay? But the other aspect, and there's tons of aspects here, and I think as I was saying, I fell into this as well, is we have seen some nice offensive production or outputs against some pretty strong opponents with Brian Ferentz at the offensive coordinator position. Ohio State 2017, USC when Iowa shellacked USC in California in a bowl game. Iowa did okay against, Iowa had a pretty good offensive performance against Mississippi State, an SEC team. The list goes on. I mean, there have been some pretty nice examples that Brian Ferentz can be a decent offensive coordinator. And I think, especially for me, by and large, that has been fool's gold. Now, going back to the Ken O'Keefe thing, I think it is becoming wildly evident that a lot of the success that Brian Ferentz had, especially in the first couple of years, were due to Ken O'Keefe. And Ken O'Keefe working alongside Brian, Coach Ferentz, and directly with the quarterbacks. Okay. So it's twofold. Not only was Ken O'Keefe there to help Brian with the offensive play calling, but Ken O'Keefe was there to make sure that the quarterbacks were ready to go, which he has done a way better job than what we have seen with Brian Ferentz in his first year. Okay. Now it is becoming evident that a lot of the success was due to Ken O'Keefe. So with a historically bad offense, what's the bottom line? Well, the bottom line is, folks, it's getting bad. Iowa is becoming almost a laughingstock nationally, because everybody else who is not an Iowa fan is like asking themselves, what are they doing? Why are they not getting rid of him? Why are they not moving on from Brian Ferentz? And believe me, that is the national perception. Now, you guys all know, I'm not a guy for national perception. In fact, a lot of times national perception is incorrect in my eyes. But by and large, across the sports landscape, people are scratching their heads wondering how Paul Chryst was fired and Brian Ferentz is not. I want to pull up this article here and just kind of point out examples of the issues that people have with this current situation. Here is an article from Cleveland.com. Kirk Ferentz is failing Iowa's fans, and his son, Brian Ferentz, should be fired. Here we go. Let's read a little bit of this. Iowa changed quarterback Saturday, maybe because the starter is named Spencer Petras and not Spencer Ferentz. Unfortunately for Iowa fans and every player on the Iowa football team working hard in practice, the change that needs to be made at offensive coordinator won't even be considered until this dismal Iowa football season is done. And it's true. I mean, that's a sad reality. By the way, I'm going to give you guys my opinion of all of this and what needs to happen with Brian Ferentz after I finish this article. And then, given the power Kirk Ferentz wields in Iowa City and the family ties that led him to install his son Brian as the offensive coordinator in the first place in 2017, there's no guarantee the necessary change will be made then. Offensive coordinator Brian Ferentz, the oldest of Kirk's 5 children, should be fired now. But it won't happen now because across 24 seasons, Kirk Ferentz has built up walls of power in Iowa City while winning 181 games as easily the longest tenured coach in major college football. He's now crawled inside of a cave of nepotism and sealed the entrance with a $42 million buyout that makes it incredibly difficult for Iowa to fire the 67-year-old head coach. That leaves the head coach to fire his 39-year-old out of ideas son, who was handed the reins to a Big Ten offense at age 34 after working for just 2 head coaches in his whole life, his dad and his dad's good friend, Bill Belichick. Now, let me comment on that, okay? I am not advocating that Kirk Ferentz needs to be fired, okay? I'm not. I'm moving closer in that direction, sadly, but I'm not willing to fully commit to that yet. And as this guy pointed out, it would be very expensive for Iowa to part ways with Kirk Ferentz, $42 million. And I can't really fault the extensions that they have given Kirk Ferentz, especially with the 5-year winning percentage that Kirk Ferentz has had. This has been almost the most successful 5-year span besides this current season that Kirk Ferentz has had in his entire tenure. Okay. So I can't necessarily fault the extension that Kirk Ferentz has been given. And so this guy's right. That leaves Brian Ferentz. All eyes are on Brian Ferentz. Now, as Iowa fans, we must be honest with ourselves and ask the question, is this more Brian's fault because he himself is not a good offensive coordinator, or is he just a product of what Kirk Ferentz allows and doesn't allow as head coach of the Iowa football team? As I've said, the metaphor that I always use is when you go to a kitchen, a really, really nice restaurant, in the kitchen, you have the head chef and you have the sous chef. The head chef tells the sous chef how to prepare the food, how to prepare the meal. And the sous chef does their best to prepare it the way the head chef is asking that individual to make the food. It's the same with football most of the time. The head coach is telling the offensive coordinator in some way, shape, or form how to prepare the football team and what strategy they are trying to roll out with. Okay. Now, like I said, it's in varying degrees across the country. So that's the question that we need to ask ourselves. Is it Kirk or is it Brian? Or is it 50-50 right down the middle, both? Saturday, Iowa benched Petrus to start the second half, a move many Iowa fans had been waiting for. In came Alex Padilla, who hadn't played since the Big Ten championship game a year ago. Neither quarterback was effective. They were a combined 11 of 24 for 81 yards and 3 interceptions in a 54-10 loss to Ohio State. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on this paragraph here, but I have said that Iowa needs to move off of both of these guys, as I think we have seen enough from both Petrus and Padilla to know that they are not the guy to make up for the lack that Brian Ferentz has as an offensive coordinator. They cannot do well in spite of Brian Ferentz, and they need a quarterback who can do well in spite of him. Okay. But I want to make it very clear, since day one with the Spencer Alex whole argument, I have said, guys, Alex, honestly, has Alex really showed us ever that he will be that much better than what we've seen out of the offense with Spencer? And I would say the answer is mostly no. Now, I'm not using this Ohio State game as an example, but I think that that's relatively true. That's because the same person was running the offense for both of them. So he's saying the reason why both of them came in and stunk it up is because the same person was running the offense, which is Brian Ferentz. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. Rutgers fired offensive coordinator Sean Gleason this season. Boise State fired offensive coordinator Tim Plow. Indiana fired offensive line coach Darren Hiller. 5 head coaches have been fired, including Wisconsin's Paul Chryst and Nebraska's Scott Frost in the Big Ten West. At Iowa, Ferentz will bench the player. Brian Ferentz told Padilla he'd be starting the second half, but not entertain holding the coach to account mid-year. I think that's a great point. I really, really do. If you are willing to bench a player and have a mid-season, now Kirk Ferentz would argue, well, they're different job descriptions. Well, yeah, one guy is getting paid $1 million a year. The other guys are not. Okay. So if you're willing to do it for a player, I think you should be willing to entertain that for coaches as well. I really, really do. Now, I'm not saying that you should be chalant about it, but you should be consistent. If you're willing to do it with players, you should be willing to do it with your $1 million a year offense coordinator. By the way, I already know that there's going to be most of the fans are going to like this video, but there's going to be some fans who are such, like I am, big Iowa fans, but are still holding their love for Iowa is blinding them to the reality of Brian Ferentz. So instead, because they don't see what I see or a lot of fans see, they're going to go, well, no, you should still support Brian Ferentz and Kirk Ferentz no matter what. We're fans. We should, and I just do not subscribe to that mentality. But here soon, everybody will be all in this party together, seeing it the exact same way. I think you're talking about two separate job descriptions in two separate areas of responsibility, Ferentz said. Yes, Brian Ferentz is making $900,000 this season as an adult employed in a job. The amateur quarterbacks don't make that. Two separate job descriptions for sure. I know people do it, Ferentz said, of mid-year firings. No, I know it's been done. It's been done this year. Again, it's just not my preference. My preference has been to play it out. And then there's evidence to show that, it's worked pretty well in the past, so we'll play it out. When has it worked out? Every time Iowa has started the season in an abysmal way, or nearly every time, with a few exceptions, like one or two, maybe the COVID year, maybe. I mean, I most of the time when Iowa starts the season average, they finish average. They do not find the answers midway through the season. And then we'll do our assessments and our evaluations whenever the season is over, and the season is not over. So when the season is over, we'll make an evaluation of what's best for our program. In the meantime, this is an embarrassment for Iowa, and the nepotism remains a stain on college football. Iowa is the prime and worst example, and I asked Ferentz if having a family member run one of the least productive units in the nation put Iowa in a bad light. It has no bearing on who the person is, Ferentz said. It's just a matter of who's coaching our football team. That's not true. That's such a cope. It really is. The guys on our staff are guys that have demonstrated success. They're good people. We're going to keep pushing forward. Guys, I'd be hard pressed. And I already said this at the beginning. I pointed out a few of the successes that Brian Ferentz has had as OC, but by and large, he has not been successful. If he had been successful by and large, we would not be having this conversation. I mean, how much further in the season does it need to go before they go, yeah, it's just he's doing a terrible job. How much further do we need to go? Does only having 7 touchdowns in 7 games, does having the same amount of first downs as the other team has touchdowns? Is that not enough, Kirk? Iowa has a rule against nepotism hires, but the football program skirted it by having Brian Ferentz report directly to athletic director Gary Barta, as I pointed out at the beginning of the video. The problem is that at many major football programs, the football coach may as well be the AD's boss. Barta isn't going to do anything Kirk Ferentz doesn't want. When I tracked down Barta after the game, he certainly didn't sound like the person in charge of Brian's future. First of all, this is from Gary. Kirk's been doing this for a long time, Barta said. I've been with him for 17 years, and at the end of the year, he evaluates every part of the program, every staff member, and that's what I know he'll do this year. In the meantime, we have 5 games. He's never changed staff members in the middle of the season. That's his plan now, and I'm going to support him. And at the end of the season, we'll see where it goes. Also, Barta agrees that 20-something amateurs are on the hook mid-season and 30-something employees are not. Changing players is something that happens all the time in the middle of the season, Barta said. Again, it goes back to Kirk's philosophy, his approach, and in 23 years, he's never changed a staff member in the middle of the season, and he's not planning to do that right now, and I'll support him. This is not the first time family trumped program in college football, but it should be called out in every moment. Florida State legend Bobby Bowden hired his son Jeff as offensive coordinator in 2001 until Jeff quit in November 2006 after a 30-0 loss to Wake Forest. Joe Paterno had his son Jay on staff for 17 years, 12 as the quarterback coach there until the bitter end. Jim Harbaugh's son Jay has been on his father's staff every year at Michigan. Those are just a few examples. Ralph Russo of the AP found head coaches employing family members at 25 of the 65 power conference schools. That's a 38% nepotism rate. What a lucky coincidence for all those millionaire head coaches that the most qualified people for those jobs happen to be related to them. It's a joke, and anyone who cares about college football should want it stopped. Any program could be next. It's easy to hide the favoritism when things are working. For instance, I think Corey Dennis, the son-in-law of Urban Meyer, wasn't the most qualified person Ryan Day could have hired as quarterbacks coach in 2020. That's nepotism by proxy, but the OSU offense is rolling. The Iowa offense is now failing, and we should care because it could happen to any college football program. A college football head coach is not a king, and he doesn't get to hand out jobs by blood. The Ferentz family can leave Iowa whenever they want, but Iowa fans are locked in for life. A football program at a state university is a public trust. Loyal Hawkeyes aren't going to abandon their program. So at the moment, they're held hostage by a head coach treating the program like a family business. Ferentz, since 2015, has also employed his own PR firm separate from the university. A rep from that firm stood in the postgame news conference while Ferentz exploits his power in hiring family at Iowa. He also has separated himself to polish his own image. Meanwhile, Iowa football suffers. We've had downturns before, Barta said. Brian has been on the staff for 12 years. He's shown that he's a quality coach and is qualified to do the job. Debatable, Gary. Debatable. Debatable. At the end of the season, Kirk will evaluate him and he'll evaluate. We already heard all that. Goggledy-gook. They would have a better chance with an offensive coaching change. Iowa's offense entered Saturday last in the nation in yards per game, averaging 238.8 and managed just 158 versus Ohio State. Iowa's only touchdown came on defense, and in 7 games, the Iowa offense has 7 touchdowns, and the Iowa defense has 3. How disgusting. This isn't a new problem. Iowa started Saturday 128th out of 131 teams in yards. Last season, the Hawkeyes were 99th in points and 121st in yards. Hold on a second. This year, they are 128th in points and 131 in yards among 131 major college teams. Whoo! Wow, that is bad. That is bad. A year ago, Iowa's Football Outsiders efficiency rating on defense was number 5. On offense, it was number 92. This year, its defense is number 2 and the offense number 101. Guys, can you imagine that Iowa is 3-4 with the second best defense in the country? This year, last season, the 10-4 Hawkeyes made the Big Ten title game in spite of their offense. Now, the 3-4 Hawkeyes are losing directly because of it. Ferentz points to past success when pressed on current failures. He mentioned something Saturday about a win over Penn State in 2000. Brian Ferentz wasn't calling the plays then. He was in high school. When I started one question by noting that Iowa has one of the least productive offenses in the country, Ferentz interrupted to say, I've noticed that, which he did. I watched it myself. He was definitely getting pissed. He just won't do anything about it. He won't do anything about his kid he put in charge. As Ferentz hides behind a pledge to never fire a coach midseason, no one should trust a fair evaluation of Brian will come at the end of the season. I agree. That's absolutely true. That is, Iowa fans, if you think Kirk is going to provide a completely and unbiased opinion of Brian Ferentz at the end of the season, you're sadly mistaken. And that's the problem with the nepotism. But as I said at the beginning of the video, that is not my biggest issue, okay? It is what it is. That happens in this country. And, organizations find ways of legally skirting that rule all the frickin' time. This is what happens in a fading monarchy. The king holds on to power as tight as he can. Wisconsin didn't let that happen with Chris, for instance. Iowa will have a choice to make with Ferentz if he doesn't make the needed change with his son. We've tried to treat everybody with past and present. Same thing with the players. I've had 3 family members play as well as... No, it's not the same as the players because you'll bench the players mid-season, Kirk. You can only shake your head. Kirk Ferentz has done much for the Iowa program, which between Ferentz and Hayden Fry has employed just 2 head coaches over the past 44 years, which is awesome. It is. But the Ferentz family has not earned the right to employ people who aren't up to the job. Agreed. I could not agree to that more. The Iowa football program doesn't belong to Kirk Ferentz. It belongs to the people of Iowa and the fans of the Hawkeyes. By putting family first, Ferentz is betraying them. Someone at Iowa has to stand up and make it stop. Well, that person's going to be me. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But kind of, you know, I listen, as I said, I do not, the main thing is not the nepotism to me. It's certainly a aspect of it, but it's not the main point. The bottom line is Brian Ferentz is not getting the job done, and he needs to go. Nepotism aside, he needs to go. And nationally, Iowa is becoming a joke, even more so, which I never thought was possible because of the nepotism, the stubbornness of Kirk Ferentz. So I'll say this right now, folks. I said at the beginning of the season that this was a make it or break it year for Brian Ferentz. But and do I need to have him fired right now? Not necessarily. I wouldn't be opposed to it. I'm at least open to him coaching to the end of the season somewhat. I'm not as, I'm not pushing as much for him to be fired midseason as this guy. I'm open to it, but I'm not pushing for it as much as he is. Okay. So if he finishes the year, I'm decently okay with that. I don't love it, but I'm decently okay with that. But if we do not see vast improvement, which I do not think we will, Brian Ferentz must be fired, or at the very least, he must be demoted because he has been given plenty of time as the offensive coordinator at Iowa to make things improve. And not only have things not improved, they have gotten worse offensively under Brian Ferentz. And that's just the bottom line. So, like I said, I'm not clamoring for him to be fired this instant. I'm open to it. But let's just be honest. It's likely he's going to stay to the end of the season. I'm assuming that the offense will not improve. And with that being said, he needs to go. Iowa needs to move on. And that brings from Brian Ferentz. He needs to be fired at the end of the season, assuming things do not vastly improve. Now, as for Kirk Ferentz and the Iowa football program, they need to take care of this fast, because if they don't, and it gets so bad to where Kirk Ferentz is losing a ton of football games and totally screws up his final years in Iowa City, it won't be good. And it'll be a tragic end to a otherwise phenomenal coaching tenure for Kirk Ferentz. Guys, he has been offensive coordinator since 2017. 17, 18, 19, 20, 20. He has been offensive coordinator for 6 years at Iowa. And again, Iowa needs to take care of this immediately. Well, maybe not immediately, but soon, because things are getting bad. Iowa is people are looking at Iowa with their nose up. And here's the thing, it's not going to get better because you also have the allegations coming downstream too. And I do want to end on that note. The final note that I want to point out, and the reason why I think Brian Ferentz is still on the staff, is because he is having his legal bills paid by the University of Iowa, which again is yet another way that we are getting screwed as the fan base. Not only are we not getting a good offense, we are getting, so not only is our offense bad and he's not getting results on the field, but we're also funding his legal battles. Now, regardless of what you think of the allegations, which I think all of you know that I have been very fair about the allegations. I have openly pointed out, how I don't think the story is completely consistent, shall we say, from the players. I've given the example of Cavante Martin-Manley, who I talked to on the phone many, many, many times, who never said a bad thing about the University of Iowa. Not once. Okay, now that is anecdotal. I understand that, but still, it's still a fact. So there is no reason that we should be funding a guy who not only is not getting the job done at $900,000 a year as one of the highest paid state employees, but also funding his legal bills on top of that. Now, I understand there are two separate issues, but still, you can only take all of the data and come up with an opinion. He needs to go, folks. Brian Ferentz needs to go, and Iowa needs to find a different solution at the offense coordinator position. I'm open to Brian being demoted and, moving to O-line, George Barnett becoming an assistant offensive line coach. I mean, whatever it is. I'm open to Brian staying on the roster. I don't love it, or on the staff. I don't love it, but I'm more open to that than him staying as offense coordinator outright. But in all reality, Iowa's just going to have to and it's probably going to be a mutually parted way situation because of the family ties. This is not a good situation, folks. Not at all. Brian Ferentz needs to be gone. He needs to be gone. This needs to be dealt with, at the very least, at the end of the season. So I know this is a tough pill to swallow, folks. I really, really do. This has not been an easy conclusion for me to come to myself, but it is what it is. I love my Hawkeyes more than I love Brian Ferentz. I've said that to you guys when it comes to players versus the University of Iowa. I will always support Iowa over, any individual player. I want Iowa to win games. I don't have the emotional tie to Brian Ferentz that Kirk Ferentz has. And because of that, like many of you, we can see that he should no longer be the offensive coordinator. Now, I don't have a list of who the offensive coordinator should be at the moment. Perhaps I will revisit that another time. But for now, that is going to be it. Let me know what you guys think. How urgent is this situation? How dire is this situation? Is it not dire? Is it not a serious situation? Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Takes 1.5 seconds to do so. If you want to donate to the channel, support your boy's coffee habit, you can do that by hitting the donation button on the channel. I love you guys dearly. DBAP, don't be a pussy willow. Facts or feelings, because your feelings just don't matter. See you guys next time. Go Hawks. Bye-bye.